April 2026 will mark the 100th anniversary of genre science fiction, when the first issue of Amazing Stories, edited by Hugo Gernsback, was published. I'll start with a few words that he put in that first editorial. It is entirely new, entirely different, something that has never been done before in this country. Therefore, Amazing Stories deserves your attention and interest. There is the usual fiction magazine, the love story and the sex appeal type of magazine, the adventure type, and so on. But a magazine of science fiction is a pioneer in its field in America. By science fiction, I mean the Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and Edgar Allan Poe type of story. A charming romance intermingled with scientific fact and prophetic vision. It must be remembered that we live in an entirely new world. 200 years ago, stories of this kind were not possible. Science, through its various branches of mechanics, electricity, astronomy, etc., enters on intimately into all our lives today. And we are so much immersed in this science that we have become rather prone to take new inventions and discoveries for granted. Our entire mode of living has changed with the present progress, and it is little wonder, therefore, that many fantastic situations, impossible 100 years ago, are brought about today. However, the magazine wasn't really a massive breakthrough for a number of reasons. A large part of its contents was dedicated to republishing old stories by Poe, Verne, and Wells. And Gernsback was notoriously bad at actually paying its writers, and so nurturing them and guiding a new field. Brian Aldiss wrote of Gernsback, "It is easy to argue that Hugo Gernsback was one of the worst disasters ever to hit the science fiction field. Not only did the segregation of science fiction into magazines, designed especially for it, ghetto fashion, guarantee that various orthodoxies would be established inimical to a thriving literature, but Gernsback himself was utterly without any literary understanding. He created dangerous precedents which many later editors in the field followed." Aldiss called Gernsback's own writing tawdry, illiterate tales, which drifts into space and back, is packed with all sorts of technical predictions, each one of which has apparently been invented just before this story opens in 2660. But society is unchanged. This is simple-minded Victorian utilitarianism. The worst Gernsbackian SF neither thinks nor dreams. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with Aldiss in terms of a science fiction magazine ghettoizing it. I think that was basically the only avenue that they had for publishing science fiction at that time. And Gernsback, Sorry Concoction, did meet with success. The lack of inwardness and imagination notwithstanding. Some talented writers did accrue, and I think E. Doc Smith's Skylark series was first published in Amazing Stories. Now, one of the things Gernsback did achieve was a level of fan participation. So he would publish the letters to the editor with the postal addresses of the sendees, and this meant that people started writing to one another and joining fan clubs, or sort of building the original fan clubs. That was a significant development. In 1930, Harry Bates started a new magazine, Astounding, And I'll quote from the editorial of the first issue of that, some of the bits of the editorial. Tomorrow more astounding things are going to happen. Your children or their children are going to take a trip to the moon. They will be able to render themselves invisible, a problem that has already been partly solved. They will be able to disintegrate their bodies in New York and reintegrate them in China, and in a matter of seconds. Astounding indeed, yes. Impossible? Well, television would have been impossible. Almost unthinkable 10 years ago. It is a magazine whose stories will anticipate the super scientific achievements of tomorrow, whose stories will not only be strictly accurate in their science, but will be vividly, dramatically, and thrillingly told. Now, there are some interesting stories from the period prior to 1939. Some of the good science fiction writers had started with an association with weird tales and H.P. Lovecraft adjacent. So that's think of 4 related writers, 2 married couples actually. Edmund Hamilton was married to Lee Brackett, and C.L. Moore to Henry Kuttner. And Moore and Kuttner particularly wrote together through the Golden Age, but they started earlier. And you can tell their earlier stories have got that weird tales crossover. And in fact, some of the best early science fiction was probably published in other magazines like Weird Tales. Other obvious classics that come to mind is A Martian Odyssey by Stanley G. Weinbaum, and John W. Campbell wrote some important stories. I've been increasingly impressed actually with Campbell's work as I become more familiar with it. But now getting on to Campbell. So he was basically the editor the genre needed to have. He took over the editorship of Astounding in 1938, and he changed the magazine name to Astounding Science Fiction. And he wrote the following editorial manifesto to announce the change of name. No average mind can either understand or enjoy science fiction. It takes an amount of imagination beyond the average man. 2, it requires a type of mind that realizes it does not know all there is to know, and has some curiosity about that unknown. It is a mind which already has an unusual stock of knowledge, that is willing to admit that there is more to know. Curiously, the less a man knows, the less he is willing to admit that he does not know all there's any sense in knowing. We cannot appeal to those who know all there is any sense in knowing, because we presuppose in these stories 2 things: that there is yet to be learned infinitely more than is now known, and that man can learn it. But only those who are keenly interested in the future believe in that. The average man realizes that the world will not come to an end tomorrow, that progress will not end tomorrow, but he realizes that so vaguely that he feels no interest in it. To enjoy science fiction, we must more than vaguely know that. We must keenly appreciate it and be willing and be interested in tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow. Those who are willing to think of the future are the ones who can and want to appealed to with Astounding. Science is the gateway to the future. Its predictions alone can give us some glimpse of time to come. Therefore we are adding science to our title. For the man who is interested in science must be interested in the future, and appreciate that the old order not only does change, but must change. Quite a heady editorial, and I think you can pick up that there's been a bit of a sea change, a greater intensity and vision. And so Campbell announced the coming of the Golden Age. Even if we mark the July 1939 issue with A. Van Vogt's Black Destroyer, the first Asimov story, and it also had the C.L. Moore story in it. For me, science fiction as a term, and possibly in itself, represents an essential dilemma of modernity. Science being the external focus on the external world, as though it has none of the features of mind, and fiction being the internal world of mind. So trying to reconcile those two realms. When I started reading SF in the late 70s, at that time 200-page novels were the main medium for science fiction. However, in the Golden Age, a time before television became prevalent, it was magazines and short stories. As Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the massage. There are collections of Golden Age stories. There's a good one by, a good series actually, by Isaac Asimov, where he has basically a volume for every year, starting from 1939. So that's a good introduction to the Golden Age, but I would recommend going to sites that show the stories that were published in Astounding. Astounding basically was the Golden Age magazine with John W. Campbell as editor. And Campbell, despite his various faults, did pay his writers better than the others. He definitely fostered the genre. He had a vision of what he wanted. I mentioned Asimov, who he mentored, and he fed stories to a lot of his writers. So as a writer, his work tapered off by taking over the editorship. The Internet Archive has scans of the magazines, so I would really recommend, if you're interested in Golden Age SF, that's the source. Go and, if you've got a tablet or something, can read the PDF downloads. That might be the best way to become familiar with the Golden Age firsthand, not through the prism of a particular revisionist, however good. So Andrew May has a great site that you can visit, which has basically all of the issues from July 1939. I did some analysis taking from 1939 to the end of 49, as 1950 really marks a new era when the novel starts to predominate and there is independent publishing, and then books are read by individual author collections. But through the Golden Age, it was issues which had multiple authors in them, and everybody basically read the same magazines. So it was a very homogenous era. Anyway, I thought I'd just share a few statistics. So through that period, A. Van Vogt was the most published author. Appeared in 52 different issues of Astounding. Lewis Paget, who's an amalgam of Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore, actually with their pseudonyms and separate and together, they did 51 stories. Next is George O. Smith, who I've only just read a little bit of, and to me, he really sort of represents the old guard, the rather dry technology. He was significantly published with 29 issues. Then Asimov is 27, and Robert A. Heinlein's 27, and Malcolm Jameson, Theodore Sturgeon, Raymond F. Jones, Clifford D. Simak, Eric Frank Russell, Murray Leinster, I skipped L. Ron Hubbard, Elsprague de Camp, Lester Del Rey, Hal Clement, Ross Rocklin, A. Bertrand Chandler, P. Schuyler Miller, E. Doc Smith, and Fritz Leiber. So those are the big names, basically. But you see that A. Van Vogt was the most published, and I think through most of that period he is probably the most popular. It's true that Heinlein took a break during the war years, well, not really a break. He was serving in the war, not in a civilian capacity, because of health reasons. The three great Golden Age SF writers are generally said Asimov, Heinlein, and Arthur C. Clarke. But that's to miss out A. Van Vogt is just to rewrite history. A. Van Vogt was the most significant author of that time. Yeah, so I just wanted to do that little recap, that little survey. So to sum up, the Golden Age was ruled over by John W. Campbell as the editor of Astounding. It was published in Astounding, and you should look at the original magazines, or even one thing I've done is basically put all of the stories into a spreadsheet, so that I've gathered a number of the stories from different sources and individual writers' collections and edited collections, like Asimov's also got a good one by Aldous, and a few other story collections. But I think for me it's really interesting looking at what the origin of a genre was. So that's sort of the importance of the Golden Age. It was where really science fiction genre flowered first. So if you're interested in the genre, I think you should delve into the Golden Age. It's much more known about than it is known, and that is because it was published in the medium of the science fiction magazine, and those magazines, they aren't currently published. So you need to look at those original magazines in the Internet Archive, read the original stories, see when they were published, what were the other stories that came that were published in the same magazines or around the same time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.